Well, let's try to make this as interactive as we can tonight. Certainly, I don't know if what you guys have heard about the initiative. Come on over, Tom. But maybe some misconceptions about what we're intending to do. We probably start a little bit from the beginning of how this, I guess, started forming and where we're at to get to this point. Maybe a little history from the beginning to where we are now. So the original concept came out of, ironically, it was the gun control legislation really that was being considered as even prior to the signing of the two big bills that ended up getting signed by the governor. And folks in Weld County were asking our county commissioners what they could do, and I'm not on the county commissioner, neither is Tom. And I attended a bunch of those meetings as well, and the question was there any nullification authority really is what they're asking at the county level. And there isn't really. If you understand the Constitution, Colorado Constitution, the counties are really an arm of the state government. So the county attorney went back and said that they really didn't have any constitutional authority in our state constitution, at least, to be able to nullify the gun control legislation. And so they looked at other options. I mean, they've, in Weld County, as is the case here, we're both in the Weld County area, and in Weld County, as it is throughout rural Colorado, there have been a long train of abuses, if you will, from the state government. And a couple of examples we've endured, assault in agriculture. We've had a lot of upstream, downstream water fights up in that area. We've had a bunch of wells shut down in Weld County along the South Platte with senior water rights, and that was a big issue for a while. And then last year with the drought, our county commissioners, worst drought in state history, our county commissioners were pleading with the governor to allow those wells to be turned back on for 30 days only to try to save the crops. There's a whole long story behind that, but he ended up not doing that, so that was no surprise. He was okay with taking those farmers' water to be able to fight fires, but he was not okay to take the farmers' water out of reservoirs to be able to well, this is groundwater, but so that was one of the issues. But kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, is of this year was obviously SB 252 and the gun control legislation. I think that put everybody over the edge. So they came up with a concept in mid-June. Had two meetings with 10 county commissioners or commissioners from 10 different counties over a period of about 6 weeks. They had those meetings, and the discussion was, should we pursue this idea? Shortly after the announcement, Tom and I and another colleague of ours, we formed the 501c4 nonprofit to be able to support the initiative. Once the commissioners kind of have an official role, they've got an official role and unofficial role, and we are helping cross-county education, obviously part of why we're here, and try to get information out and support the initiative. There's ballot initiatives now in 11 counties. So 11 county commissioners have referred the statehood question to the ballot. One of them, the original 10 did put it on the ballot, Morgan County, but we picked up two other counties, Elbert County and Moffett County. You guys have probably seen that in the papers over here. So we've talked to a bunch of other counties. We drove to Prowers last week. We've met with Huerfano and Los Animas. We're going to the San Luis Valley next week to meet with six county commissioners for a half an hour meeting there. We're looking for any and all opportunities, I guess, to try to get people understanding what the movement is, the vision for the state, the roadmap, and for you all to be able to make a decision if it's something you want to support here in Mesa County. Or I heard somebody was from Montrose County here. Cool, nice to have you. So, so that's kind of a little bit about the history, and from a Weld County perspective, they had three open meetings to try to get additional input from people on what other ideas would there be out there to address the urban versus rural divide, which is primarily what we're talking about. And out of that, actually out of one of their public meetings came this concept, this Phillips County proposal. And that is, in the short version, it would be restructuring the state Senate. So right now there's 35 state senators based upon population, which means essentially the population centers control the state Senate as they do the House. And the concept would be going from 35 state senators to 64 state senators and having one senator per county. So that would then shift the power significantly in the Senate, so the rural counties throughout the state would have, in essence, a buffer, if you will, or almost a veto, if you will, to the dominant urban areas. So that's what's being called a Phillips County proposal, because it came out of Phillips County. That will be brought up at CCI, the Colorado Counties Inc. Hopefully that will be one of the bills that CCI promotes in the 2014 legislative session. I think it's got a pretty good chance of being one of their bills. So that's going to probably happen as being pursued. A couple of comments on that. Number one, in terms of the hurdles, we're specifically asking the state legislature to dilute the representation, which is a high hurdle. The second is there's a 1964 Supreme Court case. I've got the case on here, but that specifically says that state legislatures cannot have a U.S. Senate model of representation, so there cannot be representation by state, or in our cases, the county. So they outlawed that via what's called the one-man, one-vote concept, because it said that violated the one-man, one-vote, which ironically speaking, obviously, that model is in U.S. Congress, right? So this the U.S. Senate. So the kind of a interesting twister, you have a federal Supreme Court telling the states that they can't have the same model of legislature as the federal legislature, Congress. So that was in 1964. So that's a little bit of a hurdle as well. I mean, even if it was passed at the state level, more than likely somebody would challenge that. So you have to have an attorney general and a governor that's willing to fight a battle against a U.S. Supreme Court case. So that's kind of a drawback to that. But it's certainly worth pursuing, and it would be a great solution if you think about just how to reform the state of Colorado. The third idea that came up was potentially looking at annexing into Wyoming. So that would be less of a hurdle. Instead of having to get congressional approval, it would take state legislative approval and state constitutional amendments on both sides. I think the question really is would the counties that are considering that be better off under Wyoming, and how much better off, and is that worth the effort to go into that? I think that remains to be seen. It's an option out there, but I think it's going to take, frankly, it depends what vision you have for a state. If you just want to move from a purple state to a red state, which may not have, if you want individual liberty, for example, that may or may not be a state that fights for individual liberty, that fights federal tyranny, that pushes back on things like Obamacare and over Common Core and all those things that we know that the federal legislature is wonderful for pushing down on us. So not that it's a bad idea, I think it should be pursued, but obviously I think our bias is that we think to restore government to its proper role, which is really what we're trying to do through this movement, to restore government's proper role, we have to start over. And that means fresh constitution, fresh statutes, redefine the role of government. So kind of that's a little bit of history. You want to make a few comments, Tom?
No, Jeff's exactly right. I mean, we're just businessmen in Weld County, so we've got no vested interest other than our kids and grandkids and our businesses. So this is not a salary job. This is something we do because we believe that it's the right thing. And so we've taken our personal time to attend these meetings to try to drum up support and to educate people about the objective of the 51st state. And quite honestly, we may not be the 51st state. We may be the 56th state. And there's other places that are just as actively pursuing statehood as we are. And so you've got the West Colorado State Initiative. We're on the east side. We've got the same battle whether you're on the east or west side of the Continental Divide, and that's Denver and Boulder in that corridor. And so unless we fight together, I think we're divided, we're weaker than we are together. We're much stronger. There's no question. So you've got an outline. You want me to hand that out?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go over this in a few minutes. I actually kind of wanted to. I've got almost if you want to call it a little speech here that I've been giving over the last couple of months, and I'm just going to talk about some events. So the question I think I'm going to have for you guys is, I think I know the answer probably for this crowd if you're here, is the question is, are we living under tyranny? Definition of tyranny. So I'm going to start by the definition of tyranny is arbitrary or unrestrained exercise of power, undue severity or harshness, absolute power or its use. So the question is, are we living under tyrannical government? Let me just give you some things that have been thrown out on our Facebook page and we've come up with. Some of these are old and some of these are new in terms of things that may strike an answer in your mind. Federal Reserve Act of 1913, one of my favorites. FDR confiscation of gold in 1933. The abolition of Glass-Steagall, which happened in the late 90s. We have the Ruby Ridge in Waco, Patriot Act, Fast and Furious. Our favorite EPA issue in the Front Range is prohibiting the building of NISP, Northern Integrated Supply Project, which has been drawing up states for 20 plus years. Benghazi, another one I mentioned earlier, shutting off, I don't know what you call this, but indiscriminate shutting off of senior water rights through the closing of wells in Weld County. Coins no longer made with silver or gold, no gold standard. Establishment of state health care exchange via Obamacare. Our favorite constitutional amendment, the 10% alternative energy mandate that was voted on by the people of Colorado but is in existence. National Defense Authorization Act. MF Global, John Corzine, for those that follow that whole saga. Our favorite gun control legislation that's been forced upon us, the ban of magazines of 15 rounds or more, universal background check. I've been talking a lot about Cyprus. I don't know if you guys have heard much about Cyprus and what's been happening over there, the bail-in concept. For those, that's a whole another 15-minute conversation, but through Dodd-Frank, many believe that this concept of instead of bailing out banks, bailing in banks, which in essence is going to be a deposit or confiscation at some point down the road, not only going to be banks, but we also believe that it's possible that retirement accounts and those things are either going to be confiscated or forced to be invested in treasuries. So the NSA PRISM scandal, upholding of Obamacare as a tax, $17+ trillion in official debt. Some people think it's over $100 trillion or maybe even more than that in present value of future obligations, looking at Social Security, Medicare, and all the other things. Our favorite Social Security lack of trust fund. Drone strikes on U.S. citizens, drone strikes in general, drones being all over the place. Massive expansion of Medicare, which was a Republican concept, right? The assault weapons ban, the Brady bill, CPI not including food and energy, so in essence usurping all the benefits that come, minimizing from that are CPI oriented, like veterans pay and other things like that. Striking down a Defense of Marriage Act, you can argue that wasn't necessarily a federal thing, it should be a state's thing depending upon where you stand on the 10th Amendment. Our favorite voter registration fraud that was enacted by our legislature this last time around. Another thing, failure to secure the border, the failed Reagan amnesty. Now we're back at another amnesty again here, what I call the Lucy and Charlie Brown syndrome. For those in the energy industry, assault on fracking, which isn't just private, it's public, and those are things that are happening through unelected officials and bureaucrats as opposed to legislature. Para being underfunded by $20+ billion. The proposed 27% increase on families and small businesses that are coming up, and then finally SB 252. So let me ask the question, does anybody here not think, as it stands of this definition, absolute power, its use, arbitrary or unrestrained exercise of power, undue severity or harshness, that's tyranny? Does anybody think we're not living under tyranny? I thought that was probably an easier question to ask. So another question is, do you really think that winning back and having more R's in the House, the governor mansion, and having a majority, having both the state House and the state Senate under Republican control, do you think that's the answer to restoring liberties and rolling